So if somebody said to me, for the rest of your life, you're only allowed to take one yoga practice, and that's the only yoga practice that you could engage in, I would choose Ujjayi breath. The profound impact that it has on the nervous system, the cardiovascular system, and the respiratory system, in my mind, is unparalleled by any other practice. But what I think is not appreciated enough, and what I'm moving into more and more, because I'm very interested in respiratory science, remember I have a background in physiology and neuroscience, is that not all Ujjayi is the same, right? For example, Iyengar teaches Ujjayi moving into the sinus cavities. Now, I'm not teaching that, but I teach this more intense form, which I like to call Fire Ujjayi. And that's much more consistent with what we see in the Vinyasa flow, Ashtanga, Jivamukti traditions. That's the and that has its value, right? So why do we practice in that way? Well, one, it helps us, because it is quite intense, to stay present in a posture that is challenging for us. It also, theoretically, the texts teach this, right, as well as the systems, it creates heat in the body, and that heat is meant to be purifying. But to be completely honest, there's a limitation on how much heat Ujjayi breath is really creating. It's probably more the intense asana. But from a psychological perspective, there's also a value in that practice, because it helps us to meet especially anger and levels of intolerance, whether it's to the sensation we're experiencing the pose, hence using it in strong poses, or we have an emotion that is overwhelming, that is not necessarily anger, within the practice, and we need something to really help us maintain some level of equipoise. So we make the Ujjayi more intense. It's important, though, that when your Ujjayi is intense, that you are not feeling that you are getting pain in the head, sinuses, the neck, or the shoulders, because that can very much occur if we pull the breath in too much. So even though we're doing this intense Ujjayi, we're still engaging in diaphragmatic breathing, and we're not taxing what we call collectively our accessory muscles. Now let's compare this to what I like to call Silk Ujjayi. You could call it something else, but that's what I like to call it, because I like that image of it being really soft and gentle. So that is like a whisper, right? And when we translate into English Ujjayi as ocean breath, even though technically it's Victoria's breath, right, if we translate it accurately, that's what I think of the ocean wave. So it's more like and this Ujjayi is going to be much calmer for the nervous system. We use it when we're anxious, when we're overwhelmed, when we're trying to build a certain level of resiliency. And this is 9 times out of 10 what I'm teaching. This very light inhalation through the nose, and this long exhalation Ujjayi through the nose. It feels silky, but might only be audible to the person creating the noise or somebody right next to them. And is done with the intentionality of keeping the breath even and light, as opposed to with the intention of making the breath intense. So some of the benefits of Ujjayi, especially the more silky one that we find, is first of all our vagus, right? That nerve that's become so famous in the world of yoga, right? Our parasympathetic nerve associated with rest and digest actually threads through the larynx. And so when we inhale and we slightly tighten the laryngeal muscles, which is what we're technically doing with Ujjayi, when we do it soft and light, it increases the messaging it's sending to the brain. And the vagus sending messages to the brain is actually part of how the Ujjayi breath gives rise to a sense of ease and calm. The other thing is that we have all of these stretch fibers in the lungs. Specifically, we have these slow pulmonic stretch fibers, and they respond to continuous and slow input that comes from Ujjayi. Now, technically, the more intense Ujjayi would probably activate those as well, because even if it's harsh, it's still slow and controlled. But I hypothesize that the effect on those fibers is going to be stronger when we're doing it in a more controlled and gentle way. So when you practice your Ujjayi, rather than just listening to what somebody is teaching and echoing without actually understanding some of the signs and effects, consider, do I need a practice today to bring calm to my nervous system, or do I need power? And then modify accordingly as a practitioner and also as a teacher or yoga therapist. Namaste.